everybody, and welcome back to the P1 podcast with Matt and Tommy. We are here today to talk about the Qatar Grand Prix main race, because we've had two races this weekend, with it being a sprint weekend, full of drama, full of overtaking, full of sand. It's been quite the experience for us, Tommy, hasn't it? With new rules being brought in, we've not really known where to look.
No, it wasn't the. I think it was a pretty enjoyable race. It was a good, a decent amount of action. Maybe not as chaotic as we thought it might be with 3 stops, but boy, there are a lot of talking points because, yeah, a very strange situation, one we've never seen in Formula One, really, apart from USA 2005. But thankfully, we had more than 6 cars racing and actually got a proper race in.
We did, yeah. And even then, it was almost what we had was what they should have done with the US Grand Prix to allow all the drivers to take part, but they didn't. Well, no, to be fair, I think it would have had to be even more extreme for that. But don't worry, we're going to go chat about that on our Patreon very soon. Don't worry, coming soon. But yeah, for this one, of course, we had the 18 laps as a maximum stint length on any given tyre. If it was a used tyre, then that would be taken away, the running laps, not the in or out laps or the safety car laps or anything like that, but like actual full green racing laps were taken off of that. And it was quite the difficult thing to absorb what was going on. At one point, I thought Valtteri Bottas was going to win the race. There was plenty of things. Albon was literally leading for almost a lap. We had a lot going on that we almost needed several more graphics to be able to really absorb what was going on.
Yeah, true. I mean, fair play to F1. They did have the graphics that came up that kind of said, you know, Piastri needs to pit on by lap 23 or whatever because he's now on this set of tyres or whatever. But the problem was that when you kind of got to the end and, like you say, you think that like Bottas or whatever or Zhou Guanyu's running 4th or whatever, and you go, does he need to pit? Does he not? I can't remember because normally, you know, it might be like a case of, oh, well, of course he'll just gamble now and stay out. But of course, they had to do those pit stops because they couldn't run the tyres for a very long time. So, yeah, a really strange day of Formula One, I'd say.
Yeah, very strange indeed. Now, let's dive into my most memorable moment. And it has to be the Mercedes Turn 1 crash. I mean, we've been predicting it for quite some time. We knew it was going to come. We didn't probably think it would maybe happen like this, especially with the aftermath and how it all seems to have been very much sorted out. But of course, Hamilton starting on the soft tyre, which was an incredibly strange decision anyway, for where he was starting in P3. But I guess maybe there was an element of trying to get in front of Max Verstappen, which was taken into that consideration of that strategy. But either or, it did not end well. Of course, Russell started on the mediums. Hamilton tries to go around the outside and just comes in too early. Tries to swing the car in too early. Obviously, I spoke about this a little bit in funniest tweets, but it just seemed as though he thought maybe Russell had backed out or he'd cleared Russell, but that hadn't happened, and he was in the gravel.
No, he misjudged it. It wasn't too dissimilar to the kind of Ocon thing from yesterday where, you know, you had 3 cars trying to go into one and one of them essentially has not given the other enough room, and then you kind of get a moment. But, you know, thankfully for Max Verstappen, of course, he is inevitable and watched them to fly off and he took the lead quite easily. But yeah, it was a misjudgment from Hamilton. And yeah, crazy moment to start the race. I just had a weird vibe that I thought Hamilton might end up winning, and he didn't even last turn 1. Sorry.
Yep, so if you're looking to blame anybody, I would say Tom Bellingham is absolutely your first port of call. So well done, Tommy. I hope you're really happy. But yes, that was obviously a massive incident that brought out the safety car. And all of us, I think, had a collective gasp when that happened. And we all had flashbacks to Spain 2016 for a brief moment, did we not? Question from P1 Patreon user AMG Piper. Do you think that the Mercedes drivers colliding could have a positive effect on the drivers? Now the line's been crossed, do you think they will now give each other a bit more room? That is a very different way of looking at things that I hadn't even looked at it that way. I'm not going to go down the sensationalist route here of, I mean, when it actually happened, I think we both were like, this is it. Oh, it's going to be drama from now on. But since seeing the video where Lewis went and sort of spoke to George and just gave him a little handshake and a hug and clearly apologized, and also Lewis's incredibly mature approach of just putting his hands up immediately and saying, yep, that is 100% on me. After he saw the replay, of course. His team radio was slightly different, wasn't it? The way he's like, my teammate's taking me out, whatever he said. But I don't think it's really going to change much. It seems like they have got a very respectful relationship. Hamilton almost understands Russell's position because in some ways Hamilton was Russell when he went up against Alonso in the sense of like trying to prove himself and make a big name for himself in a team that can win potentially races in the future. So I don't think it's going to change much. It seems as though they are very much water under the bridge. All good, especially if Hamilton has that stance. How can Russell be annoyed if Hamilton's just going to say, yeah, it was my fault, I'm really sorry?
Yeah, it's a very interesting take, actually, from AMG Piper, that they've essentially got a very dramatic crash between them out the way, which we mentioned, like, it's been coming. But, you know, it's much better, this situation, in a very weird way, that one, it's kind of Lewis Hamilton making the mistake, I think, has a bit to do with it as well. Two, it's just flat out 100% one of the driver's fault, and they've just admitted that, and they've just kind of cleared it up. You know, it is in a strange way, because obviously they'll be hurting the fact that, and we'll maybe get onto this later, that what might have been for Mercedes in that race, because they were obviously very quick. They've always had good race pace, and who knows if they'd have been able to challenge Max. But better that in a strange way than, say, Hamilton and Russell had collided in Suzuka, and it was kind of like a 50-50 thing, and they're both blaming each other, and it's like, oh, they need to give each other more room. Whereas in a way, sad for DTS and the people that love the drama, but it's kind of the least dramatic, very dramatic moment of the season because it's kind of very easily one driver's fault. They've said sorry and they've kind of shook hands and got on with it.
And also as well, I think it helps that Russell was able to carry on and finish a P4 because it wasn't Russell's fault. He was the one that managed to drive away reasonably unscathed. And then produced an unbelievable comeback drive. And as you say, it's with it being Hamilton and then Russell much younger into the team, I think everything played in its favour. I would like to see what happens if it is a 50-50 and neither one wants to budge on it being their fault. Then I think it's naturally going to be a different outcome. But I think that would be with any teammate pairing. It doesn't have to necessarily be Hamilton versus Russell, or even not teammate pairing, just any drivers coming together. So there you go. That's that covered. Next question, C Fusion PM. Hamilton seems to have had a lot of contact incidents in the last few years. At what point do we have the conversation that this is a recurring problem with him? And what does it mean for the future of Mercedes, given how strong George is? I think this is a stretch. This is a rather large leap of faith, I think, of trying to say that Hamilton is crash happy or whatever. Like, yeah, okay, he might have his odd incidents, but I think everyone does, especially if you're fighting in the sort of midfield, top of the midfield. And let's not forget that Hamilton has been unbelievable this year at many different points. He's accrued so many. He's literally fighting Sergio Perez for P2 in the championship in the driver's standings. So you have to say that Hamilton's been really, really good. Like, this is hands down his fault. But I don't think we're getting to a level of a list where we're going, well, Hamilton, is it about time he stuck the old gloves up in the racing boots?
Yeah,
not a chance. No. He's still top three this season, I would say, even with this.
Oh yeah, like this tweet from from C Fusion. Yeah. I've never seen a more glaring example of you're only as good as your last race, because in my opinion, George has been the one that's under pressure this season. He's way behind Hamilton in the driver's standings. I mean, reverse the roles here, and it's George crashing into Lewis. George has made a mistake, taken them both out of the race. I think George is not to the point where like imagine the media pressure on George if it was George that had done it, because he's really far behind in the title. He has struggled for points this season. He'd have made another mistake, and it would have been like a much bigger story. But because it's Hamilton, and Hamilton's had a very good season, and I said it last race, I think it's actually been quite an underrated season, because he's nearly P2 in a championship when and he's got the most out of the car. It's just a rare mistake. Yes, he's had more incidents in the last couple of years maybe than he has before, but that's no surprise, like you say, when you're battling other cars. As a Max fan, I can admit that it's very easy to go, oh, well, Max isn't having incidents, but he's driving on his own at the front, so of course he's not. Yeah. Whereas if he's in the mid-pack, yes, or battling other drivers, he naturally would have more incidents. So I don't really buy this at all. I don't think it's a recurring problem, and I don't think you can really be like, oh, what does this mean for his future? Because George has been really good, because George hasn't been really good. This race, George has been brilliant. And I think actually it's a shame for George, because I think this was maybe even his strongest weekend of the year, because he has looked the better driver. So, I don't think you can draw too many conclusions, even though for the drama we'd love to. But sadly, it's just water under the bridge for those wanting more drama.
An amicable situation. Let's see when they next come together, and if it will be the same that time as well. Tommy, what is your most memorable moment?
So my most memorable moment is the drivers at the end of the race, and the kind of what looked like a bit of a sort of light-hearted, oh my God, they're absolutely knackered, to now realizing that it's actually quite an insane race, and maybe like one that Formula One maybe got away with a little bit here, because we've seen tired drivers before. Singapore is a great example. We always say it's the toughest race on the calendar. We've obviously raced at Qatar before as well, but we had probably the perfect storm, or imperfect storm if you're one of the drivers, that it was unbelievably hot. The track is very high speed, and it was a three-stopper, so they weren't saving their tyres at any point, and they were absolutely pushing like crazy. Watching them in the cool-down room, it was almost slightly, comical, seeing Oscar lying on the ground being like, oh, God, I'm knackered and blah, blah. And then
he was laughing, wasn't he, at the Mercedes drivers crashing.
And saying thanks very much and all that kind of stuff. And then you actually see what happened after the race, and I think I first sort of kind of cottoned onto it after seeing the interview with George, where he was like, that was hell, basically. Like, I'd never experienced anything like it. It was probably borderline too dangerous. And then you hear like Lance Stroll talking about your vision's really blurry, and then Alex Albon saying that he's gone to the medical centre on his own accord because he's, nearly passing out. Ocon threw up in his helmet after like 15 laps or something. And then, of course, Logan Sargent retiring. He had a illness anyway, by the sound of it, or like a bug at the start of the weekend, and just kind of caught up with him. But yeah, I've never seen it that extreme. Not that I can remember in a Formula One race. And it sounds like F1's kind of maybe got away with one here, that it's not been more serious.
Yeah, obviously, we hope that all the drivers have a good recovery. Of course, they've got 2 weeks until Austin, so they should have a bit of downtime and can recover and yeah, it was just mad to see that sort of stuff is so unheard of. Like we've seen it previously, in the sort of maybe 2000s where the tires didn't really degrade and you had like the Bridgestones and some of the drivers on the podium were absolutely like, sort of stumbling around. But that was crazy. And I think, you say it was an imperfect storm. I think the main contributing factor was that 3-stop race, because we have had a race around Qatar before, and that 3-stop race just took out the whole, because you think of how much slower they go when they're not pushing to the absolute limit. I mean, Verstappen was doing, I think, 1 minute 25s in the race, which isn't, too far off what we were doing in qualifying. So it kind of just shows you how hard they were pushing for such a long period of the race. So I think that was probably the big thing. And I'm sure that Formula One have realised, okay, we can't do this in tracks that are like Singapore, hot, humid, and it is a MotoGP track as well.
Yeah,
there's nothing that I would say from Formula One side that they should have done differently, because this is a learning, right? This is something that they wouldn't have put the drivers out there had they thought this was going to be the case. They were trying to fix one safety issue and they sort of created another one by doing the 3-stop race. So I have no doubt that they will take this on board and make sure this doesn't happen again. Just my thoughts go to all the drivers, and as you say, like Alex going to the medical centre, Ocon. I mean, he didn't tell his team either, did he? He was which is just crazy. Fair play to all of them for sticking it out, and obviously for Logan, as you say, was a bit weak after. I think he had a flu. I think it mixed with the heat and humidity. I mean, I can't even imagine doing that with a flu. Like, geez.
Yes, it was crazy. Like you say, it's unfortunate that one situation that's maybe something you can not blame F1 for, maybe blame Pirelli for, that it's not quite planned it properly with the tires, but that situation has, like you say, created another one that's made it extremely tough on the drivers. And it was like you had moments in the race. I don't think I've ever seen drivers like lifting their visors up during pit stops.
And George had his hands over down the straight, was literally having his hands on top of the steering wheel, and you can see the steering wheel kind of going like that. And you're thinking these drivers are genuinely trying to get any kind of cooling that they can. Yeah,
it's crazy.
But the humidity in Qatar is 79%, and it's 31 degrees right now, and it's like,
Jesus,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, because they were talking about it, saying that you can see why they had the World Cup there in December, and this is that bit earlier than before, and clearly it's just the imperfect storm, like I said, of the weather, the pushing. And it's a incredibly high-speed track. I was, some will say controversially, but I actually think it's quite a unique and interesting circuit. It's just a shame that, I don't dislike the circuit personally. I think it's a good track and is a quite unique one. It looks amazing in qualifying, high speed, but clearly that fact that everything kind of joined in together made it quite a dangerous race, really, for not the reason we thought going into the race. We thought it was going to be tires exploding, not drivers pretty much on the edge of what is physically possible. Like we've seen drivers, you can look back at, and this is not to disrespect Formula One drivers from like, the 80s and 70s and stuff. But like you watch old clips and there's obviously drivers fainting before. We've seen like drivers, like pushing their car across the line. It's really hot. But drivers do this kind of training now. Like the training that the drivers have to put themselves through is absolutely insane now. So they're like built for it. And even with, I think Russell mentioned it, that, one of the things he did was put yourself in a sauna for ages and you want to get out. And Russell said that he felt that after about 6 laps that he just he was done, like wanted to get out of there. But you can't, because you've got a 50 odd lap race to do, and pushing all the time. So really bizarre situation. But I'm glad, touch wood, it seems like all the drivers are fine, all things considered.
Question from Fran Raraka. With the track limits, struggle with tyres, and many drivers feeling unwell due to the hot weather, what do you guys think the FIA can do to make this GP better, since we're going to see it for 10 more years? Yes, for those of you that didn't know or need reminding, it's here for a while, is Qatar. I know that originally this was supposed to be a replacement, well, not even a replacement, just like a placeholder for the track that they're building.
Track, right, yeah.
That I've not heard anything about since they kind of announced that. So it seems like the Losail International Circuit is staying for a bit longer. What can they do to make it better? I mean, they can't really host it at any other time during the day because they're literally doing it at night. And it's like, it's 2 hours ahead of us. So, 11 o'clock at night. So, there isn't a cooler time of day. I think the 3-stop, I think brings softer tyres, and therefore they're going to be managing more. Because I think they brought the C1, C2, C3, which was the hardest
so they could
of
push
the selection.
18 laps,
so they could push and also be, told that they can do 3 stops, so they could push it as hard as they wanted, really. This is just me spitballing, but I feel like softer tyres, it will slow the cars down. They won't push as hard, and then they'll do their usual 1 stop, and maybe they'll be okay. But it's difficult. It's difficult to really be able to tell.
Yeah, it's not like it's the first race here. Like you mentioned, we've raced here before, and it wasn't a huge problem. I'm sure the drivers were, incredibly shattered after that race still, but not to this extent. And I think it is just that the extreme nature of what's happened. If next year we go to the race, maybe it could be later in the season, so it's a bit cooler, closer towards December or later in the season. But even without
then we're getting towards finale territory, aren't we? So
yeah, exactly. So, but that being said, maybe it makes sense to do a back-to-back with Qatar and Abu Dhabi as opposed to Vegas and Abu Dhabi, I guess, with logistics. But still,
or could they change the track? Could they do something with the track that would slow it down, or because it has to be surely the medium to high speeds and it being constant attack on the driver's body that it's like pulling serious G, whereas like maybe perhaps rather than these medium to high speeds, they're more hairpin kind of. I know it's still a hard stop, but I feel like there's less sort of attack on the driver's body.
There's not really slower corners, is there, in the whole race? And then, but to be fair, I think the fact that they have done it before and it's been fine shows that I think one of the key and major things that's happened here is the fact that they're pushing for the whole race. The whole race. I think Charles Leclerc even said that's what made it so brutal, is that we were pushing, and that's what's made it so tough on the drivers. So yeah, they need to learn from it, but I do sort of understand that it's a perfect or imperfect storm, like I've said.
Certainly. Next question. P1 Patreon Discord user Waverod. Question for the race review. What's going on with all the track limit violations this weekend? It's similar to like Austria is Qatar, in the sense of there are these fast corners that the drivers want to make the most of, and unfortunately with that they're then exceeding track limits. And I don't know, I had a little chat about this on Funniest Tweets, and I feel like it needs to be dived in a bit further of where do we sit, where should we sit on track limits, because I feel that's the only thing we ever talk about nowadays is track limits. When you rewind 10 years ago, I don't think we ever spoke about track limits, and I'd love to know when the clicking point was when we all started talking about it, because before then it was a lot more fun and we just focused on the racing, but instead we're like, oh, did he go outside the white line? Oh, Lando loses P2 even though he goes over an exit curb that slows him down. And it's a bizarre situation to be in, because it's not like you can look at another sport and go, well, how do they do it? Because this is really the only way. It's the pinnacle of motorsport, Formula One. And you'd think that they would have the cutting edge technology to potentially fix it. On one side, you could have self-policing curbs, which therefore then, if you think that you're going to be, if they make it slower, if they put gravel traps or whatever, then maybe that fixes it. But you can't really do that around really fast tracks, and then you actually create a non-safe environment, because if it's a really quick corner and then you go straight into a gravel trap, that might actually be quite catastrophic. So, okay, not that. I think they spoke with someone from the FIA who was saying that they're looking into sort of medium long-term solutions, which includes electronic sensors and things like that. But that requires a lot of technology and it requires investment, because at the end of the day, it's the tracks that actually have to do this, unless Formula One bring it in the back of their van, which I'm not sure is probably what they're going to do or willing to do. So there's plenty of moving parts with this, that it's not like an easy fix. Otherwise, I think we would have done it by now.
Exactly. It's such a ridiculous situation that, you look at football. I know there's been an example recently where they still got it wrong, but they have VAR, and essentially it's one football on a pitch, and the action is always in one particular place. But the problem with Formula One is you've got 20 cars going around lap after lap, and it's
20
too
balls
much
going around the football field.
Exactly. Imagine a football, like where it's 20 balls, and then it's constantly like, oh, did that ball go out? Oh, is that ball gone out? Oh, wait. Like you wouldn't be able to, and it's one person doing it, and that's the problem. It seems like it's easy to go, oh, look, this person's done this, but like we had the conversation on Friday, which seems forever ago now, after qualifying, but that these incidents are coming in way after, because they're having to sit there and watch through like lap after lap of replays, because they can't do it live. There's no electronic sensors or anything. So it is quite ridiculous, and it's always going to be a problem on these kind of tracks. And I'm so conflicted, because Hamilton made a point about Lando's lap and being like, I think they should just let us go, wide or whatever, because you don't actually gain time. Because a lot of the incidents that we've seen sometimes looks a bit like a mistake. You get a bit of a swapper and you run wide and you get a track limit warning, but it's like, I'm not gaining I'm not trying to cut the corner here. You can understand getting a track limit penalty if you're, going on the inside of a curb and cutting a corner, or running wide to gain loads of time. But when you've literally made a mistake, I think Stroll was saying it, that the heat exhaustion, everything like that, it was crazy. And you're flying into corners at 150 miles an hour, and you're like out by millimeters, and you're getting penalties. Is kind of ridiculous. But then, I know I'm sitting on the fence here, but at the same time, there's other drivers that haven't got a single thing.
Say it. You know who you want to say. Max Verstappen.
Well, Max did it, but there's he I don't think he got a single even.
He didn't get a violation, not even one.
Yeah, exactly. But there's been a lot of other drivers out there that didn't get penalties for now. Maybe in 3 days' time, they watch the race back and find out that every driver did do it, and they've all been disqualified, and Carlos Sainz wins the race. But it's just a ridiculous situation now. And like you say, I actually find it quite boring, because it's just like the same thing again and again, and then it would disappear for a bit, and then we'll get back to Austria. We'll have this exact same podcast question. We go, what do we do? And I don't know. It's really not an easy situation to police, and part of me makes me think they should just do the IndyCar route and let them just go wide, and that's it. Like,
let them go crazy, because it is. I've been calling for a blanket rule for as long as I can remember, since we've been speaking about track limits. We've now got the blanket rule, and I'm like, some of the lines, it's getting a bit farcical in this sense as well, where the focus is kind of taken off the racing, and it's now, or the changing of positions is happening not on track but in the steward's room. And Perez has got another 5-second penalty. Now Stroll has. Stroll's got another one. Perez has got another one. It just feels like things are going on without you actually seeing it, because it's like it's all these rules that are being broken. That it's Yeah, it's so difficult. Because there's only certain parts of the track that you will gain an advantage on if you cut or extend a corner. If those corners are self-policed in some way, surely that just does everything and that will be all good and we don't have to talk about it anymore. But it just isn't. You know, like, remember Hamilton when it wasn't policed in Bahrain that time and he went wide about 20 times and he was having a great time because it wasn't policed.
Yeah.
If you had something that was self-policing there, that he wouldn't actually gain any time, like dirt or I don't know. But
it's so weird because we F1 fans love a moan, and we'll all moan about that when Hamilton goes off 60 times and go, that's not fair. But then I'd also complain if Hamilton ran wide 3 times in a 70-lap race by 3 centimetres, and you go, well, it's not flat out cheating, is it? It's just running slightly wide. You know,
3's a black and white flag, so then he has one more.
You know what I mean? But there's actually a fascinating video if you find it on YouTube of some old footage, and you mention it about we never used to have this problem, and it's actually from Austria. I want to say about 2003, and they do just let them go wide. And I don't remember that actually ever happening, but they just don't police it, and they go, well, if you run wide, you're bouncing over a curb, you're kind of losing the car a little bit. You're not gaining an advantage, but so you've kind of messed up your qualifying lap a little bit. But why do you need to like give them a penalty? The penalty is that you've kind of gone off and messed your lap up. So maybe that's the solution, but
we're never satisfied, are we? We're never satisfied.
It's almost like the problem is we're so particular over it, and it's got to like, just stay within the white lines, but the drivers are always kind of like, it's not as easy as it seems.
Yeah, especially when you think, you know, we see it from like T-Cam perspective or whatever. They're literally in the car, like, you know, off the ground. They can hardly see the front of their wheels.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's crazy when you actually do it like that. You know, go on the F1 game and go in cockpit cam, and then you kind of understand a little bit just how difficult it is. But it will be a continuous discussion that we have. We'll see if they bring any new technology at some point in the near future. Next question, Acid Green 19. Was this race a good indication that more pit stops doesn't make for a better race? It's interesting because I think that you could say that it was a 7 out of 10. It was reasonably enjoyable. It was chaotic because there were loads of overtakes going on. But it was, for me, a little bit too confusing in some ways. Like, I'm kind of putting myself in a casual fan's perspective as well, which is what Formula One is trying to, you know, continuously entertain. They are the main part of the fan base, of the casuals that just tune in on a Sunday. I can only imagine how confused they would have been with everything that was going on. And just, if you were just to look at the 3-stop mandatory part, that was mental, as I kind of alluded to with Albon and Bottas up there, and 1 minute Lawson's last, then he's 10th, and it just had so much going on. And you know, I wouldn't be against making sure we have 2 stops in races because I feel like that was a happy medium. But this 3-stop was extreme. It wasn't done for entertainment purposes. It was done for safety, but it's definitely not something we're going to ever do again, I don't think.
No, it's a one-off, but yeah, the race wasn't as absolutely unbelievable as maybe a lot of us were maybe thinking it would be, because we were like, oh my God, 3 stops is going to be absolutely epic and chaotic. But I'd argue that, you know, that race, if it was a 1-stop, you've still not... I do like having more pit stop because it keeps you guessing and there's things happening during the race, and, you know, it's constant entertainment. But 3 stops may be too much. I still think 2 is the way to go, and I will die on the hill of hard, medium, soft in the race. You get 2 pit stops, and because those races where it is a 1-stop and Max wins, you know, Max won that race from lights to flag, but it was a lot.
Albon nearly took that away from him. Nearly had 1 lap, didn't he, Albon? But it's not. Yeah, that was.
I'd say that was a better race than the one stops where Max leads from lights to flag. So not necessarily saying it's like the best thing ever, but I would say it was better than a one stop still.
It was an experience, wasn't it? I think that the beauty of strategy is that there is a level of variation. Some might do a one stop, some might do a two stop. What we had was that everyone was forced onto a strategy that on paper is massively fun, but there wasn't actually that much variation that could be done with that strategy, with the amount of laps that were on the cards, in the sense of like, Piastri pitted on lap 13. And then after that, we pretty much knew what he would do because he had to go like 18, 16 or whatever to the end of the race. So there wasn't much. It wasn't like we could go, Piastri might go a bit longer here because he wants to avoid traffic. There was none of that because he was forced into pitting. Yeah,
and it's a shame. It was a dramatic moment, and like say, DTS will be loving it. But it's a shame that Hamilton was out on lap 1 and Russell was down the order, because Hamilton was on a different tyre strategy. Maybe it would have been a bit more interesting. Not saying they would have beaten Max, but you'd had maybe a bit more interest between the McLarens and the Mercedes, at the very least, swapping positions a lot, and how that would have panned out. So that was a bit of a shame, but yeah, what a chaotic weekend.
Yeah, I mean the Mercedes coming together absolutely gave Oscar Piastri P2 in his lap, basically, didn't it? Because they came together. Alonso got caught up. I think Leclerc also went wide, and Piastri went on the inside and was like, "Thank you. I am now in second place," and the bad qualifying has been eradicated almost immediately. But I do wonder, as you say, like if Hamilton had stayed in the race, potentially swung around the outside of Verstappen with his soft tyres and the pace he might have had in those first couple of laps, could they have thrown some sort of spanner in the works with Verstappen? But then I would say on the flip side of that, if both Mercedes are in the race, McLaren don't perform as strongly as they did, and Lando's maybe stuck a little bit longer in the sort of midfield. And yeah, I think it would have been a much trickier race for Lando and for Oscar as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Next question comes in from Emily Holt. Do you think if Lando had started P2, he could have won the race? What do you think, Tommy?
No, but I think it would have been closer. I think it was actually quite interesting to see, and it's something that they kind of mentioned, that because of the nature of you have to do stints, Red Bull, one of their very strong points is the fact that they can go long on their tyres, and they've got fantastic tyre wear, and that's maybe something that played into Piastri's advantage, that everyone has to pit after a few laps, and tyre wear doesn't become a problem because you're just pushing and it's all about raw speed. So I think that allowed the McLarens to be closer to Max. I don't think he would have won. It would have been fascinating to see if Lando had started P2 and maybe got Max at the start. Then you never know, Max, because yesterday we did see that. Max didn't win the sprint because he couldn't get past Piastri and had to think about his tyres and stuff.
And today's race was basically 3 sprints, wasn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So you never know. It certainly would have been fascinating to see, because they were close at the end of the day. I think McLaren will be a little bit conflicted, because there's probably part of them that's like, boy, what a recovery after that absolute nightmare of qualifying when we said they must be kicking themselves. But then I wonder if part of them is also kicking themselves maybe a little bit, thinking if we'd have got pole like we did, or like a 1-2 like we did in the sprint quali, maybe, maybe, just maybe, would have made for a really fascinating race. The sprint order, sorry, there's a wet microphone.
Just smash the microphone. Yeah.
The sprint order, grid order for the main race would have really been very tasty indeed.
Certainly, both between the two McLaren drivers, of who's going to win the race, and then having to fend off Max Verstappen at the same time. My answer to this question is probably no as well, but I think it would have been a lot closer. I think Lando showed that he had a bit more pace than Oscar in the race again, and despite it being a 3-stop race and the drivers being able to push a lot harder, Lando still had that edge in the race, but he had too much time to sort of catch up. And then, of course, McLaren came over the radio to let Lando know that they are holding position, which to a lot of people, I'm sure we wanted to see that ding-dong action. And I'm not sure how much Lando genuinely put his foot off the gas for that particular battle. But yeah, Verstappen said after the race that there was, their advantage wasn't as big because the Red Bull is built not only to be fast, but also to be kind on its tyres. And to have this 3-stop race, the one that they had to do 3 stops, it sort of negated that end of stint pace that Red Bull always have. So that's why I think Lando would have been absolutely in the mix. And, Max had a little 4-second pit stop as well. And McLaren were on fire with their pit stops. Just want to shout out that 1.8 seconds for Lando. And I think they had another 2 and a 2.1 second pit stop as well. They were flying.
Yeah. The turnaround from Bahrain from McLaren has been exceptional. I'm trying to think of a bigger turnaround during a season for a team, from going from literally looking like back markers and being absolutely dreadful. They had the brake disc, that was this year, wasn't it? The brake disc problems and things like that at the start of the season, looking like they could barely even finish the race, to getting towards the end of the season and they're, finishing races 2 and 3 behind Verstappen and banging out 1.8 second pit stops. It's, McLaren are cooking right now.
They certainly are. Right, now let's move to our biggest winner. It can be a driver or a team. And I am going to lock in Alfa Romeo. Absolute GOAT status for Alfa Romeo. 8th and 9th after all penalties have been shaken out. Bottas in 8th. And then Zhou in 9th. Perez got another penalty right at the end when the celebrations were happening, which demoted him down to 10th. But yeah, Alfa Romeo, I mean, they are, we consider them to be probably the slowest team on the grid at the moment, and they've managed to run away with 6 points.
Yeah. Shout out to Ruth Buscombe for a bit of a strategy masterclass there, kind of pitting early, and there are loads of moments in that race where we were constantly going like, Alpha, are they legitimately in there, or is this, or are they going to pit with 2 laps to go and plummet to 15th or whatever? But no, what a performance when not many points are on the table these days. To get both your cars into the points, I don't want to curse Alfa Romeo, and I'm sorry in advance if I say it, but you've got to think that, particularly with Haas and how dreadful they are, it's going to take some kind of miracle for them to beat Alfa Romeo now for that 8th place.
Well, yeah, they overtook them with that result. They've gone from 9th to 8th, and then they're now 4 points ahead of Haas, and they're 7 points behind Williams. So perhaps they have another miracle somewhere down the line, and they might even be able to snatch 7th away from Williams, which you wouldn't think would happen. I think, if anything, Williams and Albon might score a few more points between here and the end of the season, but it's possible.
Yeah, it's got to be Alpha for biggest winner, definitely. What a superb result.
Biggest loser now, and I am going to lock in Lewis Hamilton, mainly because there was a podium on the cards. I don't think Verstappen was up for grabs, but I think Mercedes were in a prime position to work together to utilise and pull away from Ferrari as well in the Constructors' Championship. But instead, Hamilton out the race, Russell finishing 4th. It just, I would say Mercedes as a whole, but I think Hamilton more specifically, he had a good opportunity at the start to potentially lead, but instead caused a rather large incident.
Yeah, surely it's got to be Hamilton. Sainz, obviously, through no fault of his own, not even starting the race, is a poor one. And maybe this is the frustrated Yuki Tsunoda fanboy in me, but I will also mention AlphaTauri because unless I'm wrong, and I do apologise to AlphaTauri in advance, but if there's a particular reason why this is the case, but I watch Yuki Tsunoda racing a lot of the time, and he's up there. You watch the start of the race, he's up there in 9th, and you've got Stroll, Gasly, Albon, Perez with 500 seconds of penalties, and he's still 15th. Like, what are they doing with their strategy? Because he had the speed, he had a good qualifying result, he'd done really well, and you've got to think in a race like that where you've had, three retirements, 2 of them in the top teams. Alfa Romeo have got double points finish, and AlphaTauri aren't even close to getting points. Like, no wonder they're not scoring points this year if they can't even get a result in a race like that. It's very frustrating as a Yuki stan to
very
witness
angry
it.
Tommy Tsunoda fan there giving his opinions. And no, fair enough. AlphaTauri had a terrible weekend this weekend, so maybe they'll bounce back. But yeah, Tsunoda, as you say, was looking great, and I'm very surprised that it turned into completely nothing. I think you even said during the Twitch stream, like, watch Tsunoda be fighting for the points and then finishing 17th. It was close. It was P15.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's now go to our predictions that we made on Wednesday and see how we did. My biggest good surprise was Logan Sargent. That did not pay any dividends.
He was looking good at one point.
He was a couple of seconds behind Albon. I was like, come on, this is quite surprisingly good, isn't it, Tommy? And you were like, yeah, this is all right. And then unfortunately didn't feel too well and had to retire. So new points.
I went for Pierre Gasly, who there were moments during this weekend where I was like, I've pulled an absolute blinder here, particularly in qualifying when he was setting really good laps. But no, he decided to become the new Ocon and get 5,000 track limit warnings.
So no points for you. Biggest flop. I want to apologise to Liam Lawson fans because, my God, did the flop come out with full force. Not only did he spin out of the sprint, he got knocked out in Q1, didn't he? I think both times.
Yeah.
And then finished plumb last in the main race. So, sorry, but I'll take the point. Thank you.
I went for Fernando Alonso, which I can't really claim, even though he went off, because he's still probably got pretty much the maximum, which is just Fernando Alonso things. Somehow he's got P6 in a race where his arse was on fire and also also went off into the gravel. So, can't really claim that one.
Yeah, fair play to Fernando Alonso. Still finished 6th despite all of his issues, and his car literally being on fire underneath him is just GOAT things, isn't it, really, from Fernando Alonso? So thankfully managed to get out of the gravel trap because did he get away with the unsafe rejoin?
Yeah, he did.
How on earth did he get away with that?
They clearly were too busy watching 6,000 replays of cars going off track limits and just didn't.
They were too busy putting a check next to his name for track limits because he went off and into the gravel. Yeah. But okay, so no, unfortunately, no flop for Alonso. Pole position, we both went for Max Verstappen and we both get a point.
Sure did.
Sprint shootout, we both went for Max Verstappen.
Which was wrong.
And that is not correct. So 0 points. For the sprint winner, I went for Max Verstappen. No. And you went for?
I picked the wrong McLaren and went for Norris.
Crazy. Oscar Piastri, the legend.
Yeah.
Fair play to him, but not to us. No points. And then top 3. In third place, I went for Sergio Perez. Good. Really glad I thought the comeback, the bounce back was this weekend, and it was not.
Yeah, I went for Leclerc. Also didn't happen.
No. Norris 2nd. Damn it. Nearly.
Yes.
But no.
Same. Went for Norris 2nd. Didn't happen.
And then both of us, of course, went for Max Verstappen for the victory, which is a solid 1 point.
Yeah, we didn't go for Piastri, did we? Because I think we both had that kind of thought of, he's struggling with tyre wear at the moment. It's not going to work. And then can't have tyre wear when everyone has to pit.
Yeah, exactly. I had him kind of in 4th in my mind's eye, but no, he did much better than that. Finally, our one crazy prediction. My pain got some reward. I went for no Ferrari podium, which is correct. Yeah, exactly.
I put Alonso doesn't make Q3, which I am glad I'm wrong.
Yeah, no points for you, but you are a happy man.
Yeah.
And then the fans' crazy predictions. My, oh my. We've got a couple of absolute worldies. Let's get the wrong one out the way first. Mega Tired Human, Logan in the points. That did not happen, unfortunately, for him. Then Tamsin Riddle, Piastri first win. Oh my days. I know we shouted you out in the previous podcast, but we got to shout you out again. That's unbelievable.
Fair play. Yeah. And we kind of roasted this one a little bit, didn't we? Like,
we did.
God, you're on the hype train. He's only got his first podium. And obviously it's not a Grand Prix victory, but it is a first.
It's a win.
First win. Won the sprint. And yeah, fair play. What a prediction.
And finally, Heels Lady. Perez not in Q3. Another W. Although the amount of non-Q3 appearances, we probably shouldn't have said this was a crazy prediction. I'm pretty sure I even questioned it being a crazy prediction at this point. But there we go. Well done to you lot for getting some points for the listeners. And that is that. That is the end of our Qatar Grand Prix race review. Tom Bellingham, how would you sum up some final thoughts for me?
I don't know how I can sum up final thoughts. I feel like there's so much to process from that race. And I guess one thing I'm also thinking of is driver ratings, as is normally the case on sprint weekends, but I think even more difficult with a crazy race like that. Can't wait to get cancelled for my opinions on that one, because it's going to be a difficult one to rate, I think.
Yeah, we'll have some comments. What do you mean? Did you not see Kevin Magnussen's 7th stop on lap 47 where you get... there's going to be a lot of that. So we're going to have to do some analysis for sure. My final thoughts are thank you, everybody, for tuning in to our watch-alongs once again. We had amazing numbers and people watching and subscribing and being a part of this P1 venture. So thank you so much for all of your support, as always. And we will see you for another race review podcast in a couple of weeks when we've done Austin, so that'll be fun, won't it? And Danny Rick being back, Liam Lawson's last race, being plumb last.
Ouch!
That's
you
pain.
cursed him for his last race.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, I think I said this in the watch along that I think Daniel Ricciardo could still have a broken hand and he'd race in Austin, because boy does he love that place.
Certainly does.
He'd happily cruise around at the back with his arm in a sling just to race at Austin, wouldn't he?
Absolutely.
So yeah, it'd be cool to see him back, and it'd be very fascinating to see how he does, because we didn't really get to see it properly in those couple of races that he did.
We did not, and that is it. Thank you, everybody. See you soon. Bye.
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 That was a long old podcast.
Long pod.